And thanks for stopping in, folks. Thanks for stopping by over at the Parsonage around the kitchen table for some Bible study. It is January the 14th. I'm Mike Carey, pastor of the First United Methodist Church of Nevada, Iowa. And we're waiting for a blizzard to get here on this Thursday. Almost halfway now through the month of January. Hard to believe we're already that far along, isn't it? But we're here for the book of Acts study. We're up to chapter 22, verse 22. And recall Paul's in Jerusalem now. And he has been in the temple, basically minding his own business, sponsoring a couple of guys who were supposed to be going through the ritual of cleansing for Nazirite vows. And a mob has gathered and has attacked him. And the Roman centurions and the garrison there at Rome at the Castle Antonius has swept down into the temple to rescue him. They're not really rescuing him. They're trying to stop a riot, and they're blaming him for it. So Paul has been asked to make a statement to the crowd, which he did. And he ends that statement, rather, we're to the point where he says, God had told him, get on your way, for I will send you far off to the Gentiles. Well, as soon as Paul says Gentiles, that at that point his hearing with this particular crowd is over and done with. So verse 22, up to this statement, they, meaning the mob, listened to him. And then when he said Gentiles, they cried, destroy such a fellow from the earth, for it is not proper for him to live. And while they were shouting and waving their garments and throwing dust into the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks. He ordered him to be examined by scourging to find out why they had shouted like this against him. And when they had tied him up with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, is it right for you to scourge a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned? And when the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. He said, what are you going to do? This man is a Roman citizen. And the commander came to him and said, are you a Roman citizen? And Paul said, yes. And the commander answered, I obtained this citizenship at great price. But Paul said, I was born a citizen. So at once the men who had been about to examine him stood away from him. And the commander was afraid when he realized that he was a Roman citizen and that he had fettered him. On the next day, wishing to know the truth about the accusation made by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin to assemble. And he brought Paul down and set him before them. So, here we have some cultural things that need to be explained so we can understand everything's going on. Paul had been able to silence the crowd as he began to make an explanation to them. Now, whether he just saw this as an opportunity to preach and to share his testimony, or was he honestly trying to make an explanation and trying to reason with the crowd? Not really sure. We're not inside Paul's head. But as soon as he said anything about the Gentiles, they were up in arms again. It wasn't so much that the Jews objected to preaching to the Gentiles. There were a lot of Gentile proselytes, non-Jews who had turned to Judaism, had become Jews, but what they resented was that their place of privilege was being offered without price. See, Paul was saying that you can gain this specialized status of becoming a Jew without having to undertake the law or circumcision. That they objected to, and they objected to it quite strenuously. Also, they objected to the idea the Jews basically wanted to keep God for themselves. They considered the Gentiles to be fodder for the fires of hell. It was okay if a few turned and became Jewish, but by and large, the Jews hated the Gentiles and they wanted to see judgment coming upon them. And so now that Paul was doing this, and also Paul is not, for many of them, representing the truth of Judaism, because he's representing this sect referred to as the Way. And he was talking about Judaism fulfilled, as that is, the Messiah has come, the long promised, long hoped for Messiah. Many thought that, this Jesus was totally dishonored because he died on a tree. He could not possibly be the Messiah, and they resented that Paul was saying so. And so you have all of these emotions that are running rampant at this point. And as soon as he says Gentile, they begin reacting, as was the custom. They are shouting. They are taking off some of their garments and waving them in the air. They're throwing dirt in the air. Maybe if they had a rock or two close at hand, they were picking those up and they were firing those up at Paul as well. We don't know for sure. It doesn't say anything about that. But the uproar starts again. And so again, this is not something that the commander of the garrison wants to see or have going on, because it would be a violation of the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. And for that to happen was just an absolutely bad thing. And so they whisk him into the barracks then. Well, now the commander decides, well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And so he's going to question Paul by scourging. Now, the scourge was basically akin to what we would call a cat of nine tails. It was a handle, and out of which came several leather straps, and at the end of each one there was a jagged piece of metal or a lead dum-dum that had been attached to the thongs, and it was extremely painful. It cut, it ripped. It was a severe beating. It wasn't a judgment of condemnation. In fact, it wasn't considered to be a judgment of all. It was simply an interrogation technique. Imagine, talk about, the cops roughing up somebody these days, tune them up a little bit in terms of questioning them. This was, okay, we're going to scourge you for a little while, then we're going to talk to you, and of course you're going to tell us the truth. Quite often people who were being questioned by scourging didn't survive the ordeal. It was extremely brutal. So Paul turns to the centurion who is binding him and says, is it lawful for you, to scourge a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned? Now, Paul is a Roman citizen. He is born a Roman citizen. And natural born Roman citizens, there are a couple of ways, let me put it this way, that you could win or gain citizenship as a Roman citizen. Number one was to be born inside the walls of Rome. That automatically made you a Roman citizen. Another would be to be born in Italy. That qualified you. Or then to have your parents be citizens, either natural born or have bought their citizenship. If your parents were citizens, you were citizen born. You could also earn your citizenship if you served in the legions under the military. After a period of time, you could have fulfilled your military obligation, and one of the things they gave you as payment for your military service was citizenship. You could also buy your citizenship. It was costly. It was expensive, but you could do that as well. But it is always better in this day and era to be able to say, I am a natural born citizen. I am a natural born Roman citizen here. And Paul is. His parents, either that or just his father, but probably both of his parents, born in Tarsus, were considered Roman citizens. Therefore, now the significance of that is that as a citizen, you had certain rights. And one of those rights is that you were not to be fettered if you had not been condemned for a particular crime. It was unlawful. In fact, to quote, let me see, I got to find it here. Cicero, who is one of the great senators, lawgivers, rulers in Rome of all time, Cicero said that it is a misdeed for a Roman citizen to be bound. It is a crime for him to be beaten, and it is almost as bad as to murder a father to kill him. So, Paul says, I'm a citizen. Now, one thing about these soldiers, they know the law. And they realize now they have broken the law. They have unlawfully fettered, tied up a Roman citizen. This is not good for them because they could be executed for this, for breaking this particular law. Rome took citizenship very, very seriously, and they protected the rights of those citizens with fervor. So the guys in charge of the scourging detail go immediately to the commander, and they want to know, what are you doing here? Do you realize what you're doing? This man's a citizen. So he's going to check this out for himself. And being a little arrogant, he says, well, I'm a citizen too. I purchased my citizenship. It cost me a great deal. And Paul says, I was born a citizen, which immediately, those that purchased their citizenship were second-class citizens to those who were born a citizen. And so now Paul has put the fear of God into this guy. Not only has he been unlawfully fettered, this is a man who has been born free, who was about to be beaten by him, and this could not go well for the commander at this point. So immediately he looses Paul, frees him, and realizes, okay, I've got a duty here. I've got an obligation to figure out what's going on here and to protect this guy. And so he frees Paul, and he determines, okay, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And so he confronts the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling body that was most likely behind some of the riot from the day before. And he's going to get to the bottom of this. He's going to present Paul to them, and he's going to hear what's going on here, and he's going to get to the bottom of this. And so he takes Paul out after the Sanhedrin has been called and gathered the next day, and sets him before them, and probably says something to the effect like, what's going on here? What problem do you guys have with this man who is a Roman citizen and, as far as I'm concerned, has done nothing wrong? So this takes us up to chapter 23, verse 1. Paul fixed his gaze then on the Sanhedrin and said, Brethren, oh, interesting. See, now he's putting himself on equal level, on equal footing with them. He's identifying himself with them as a Jew. Brethren, I have lived before God with a completely pure conscience up to this day. Now, the high priest Ananias, who was also the high priest when Jesus was brought before the Sanhedrin, ordered those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. And Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Whitewashed sepulcher. You look good on the outside, but inside you're full of nothing but rot and dead man's bones. You're a dead man walking. And goes on and says, do you sit judging me according to the law? And do you order me to be struck and so break the law? Now those who were standing beside him said, Are you insulting God's high priest? Which was equally not considered to be a good thing to do. And Paul said, I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. Yeah, sure. He was probably wearing the trappings of his office. Paul's no dummy here. Yeah, I didn't know that he was the high priest. If I had known, I would not have spoken so. For it stands written, you must not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Yeah, see now what Paul's doing here, he's taking an opportunity to quote the law back at them and to prove to them, to show them, hey, I know the law too here, guys. You're not dealing with the village idiot. Okay? Now, Paul knew that one section of them were Sadducees and the other section were Pharisees. So he shouted out to the Sanhedrin, brethren, I am a Pharisee and the son of Pharisees, and I am on trial for the hope of the resurrection of the dead. Now, the difference between Pharisees and Sadducees was, remember, while they're all Jews, not all Jews think the same. Just like all Christians, in terms of their theology, do not think the same. Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist Christians, all Christians, but they don't think the same. In terms of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Pharisees were the larger of the two groups, and they believed in the resurrection, the hope of the resurrection. The Sadducees did not. They did not believe in the resurrection. Now, Paul, knowing who it is that he's dealing with here, and being the provocateur that he was, I lost my place here now. Says, brother, I'm a Pharisee, the son of Pharisees. I'm on trial here now for the hope of the resurrection of the dead. That is a key sticking point between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. When he said this, a disturbance arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the meeting was divided. Divide and conquer, an ancient philosophy here. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, while the Pharisees acknowledge both. And there was a great uproar. Paul, you did it again. This time he did it on purpose. And some of the scribes who belonged to the party of the Pharisees stood up, and they argued and said, we find no fault with this man. What if a spirit or angel has spoken to him? And when a great disturbance was going on, the commander became afraid that Paul might be torn apart by them. So he ordered the guard to go down and to snatch him out of their midst and bring him back again into the barracks. Here we go again. So there is a reckless audaciousness about Paul that is just absolutely amazing sometimes, because he knew how to stir things up. He knew how to create a problem. And here now, why he chose to do it at this point, I'm not sure, to be quite honest with you. It might have been more fruitful for him to continue his debate and, try to argue with them about who he was and why he was doing things, and maybe get them to relent. Or Paul saw that this wasn't going to go anywhere, and that he might as well do something to stir things up and get himself out of there, which most assured, and so he knew what he was doing. It was kind of like going into a crowded theater and yelling fire. You know what's going to happen. I am a Pharisee and I'm on trial here for my Pharisaical beliefs. And right away, bang, there it goes. The Pharisees believed in what we call predestination. The Sadducees believed in what we call free will. And the Pharisees believed in angels and spirits, and the Sadducees did not at all. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection of the dead. The Sadducees did not. And so violence erupts again. And so, to maintain the peace, and also now to save a Roman citizen, the Romans have to go to Paul's rescue again. And because this is a very heated debate that is going on. It most likely was a riot. And Paul here now is apparently the commander has enough of an interest in Paul that he's not going to allow anything to happen to him. So this will take us up now to the point where Paul will, by the aid of the Romans, begin to make his way towards Rome, which will be the start of the third and the final missionary journey for Paul. And it gets us now on the last legs of the book of Acts. As Paul, he's got some time left. It'll take him a while to make his way to Rome because he's going to be detained along the way. But we're getting there. We're getting there. We are almost there. So we'll stop here, chapter 23. Verse 11 through 24. It's starting to snow outside as I'm sitting here at the kitchen table in the parsonage kitchen and looking out across the street at the library. It's snowing now, and so the storm is getting here. So you take care, stay upright on 2 feet, and may the Lord bless you real good. Thanks for stopping by today.